Hello, I'm Jessica. I'm here to talk to you about building DevRelopers, and I'll tell you about my cutesy term here. I'm really excited to be back in Tokyo. I was here last year, and even though it's very hot, I love it here. I also really love sushi, so I'm totally happy eating sushi every day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm really excited to be here, and we'll talk about building DevRelopers, the proactive and reactive approach. So a little bit about me. As they mentioned, I'm an engineer by background, and I've done a lot of community building. One of those is a conference in Denver, Colorado, called Dinosaur.js, hence my lovely dinosaur dress here, which some of you have asked about. And I live in Colorado. I love skiing and love my dog. I made sure I did not put any pictures in this presentation, but if you want to, feel free to show them. I'll show them to you later. Anyway, you can find me on the internet website or Jessica E. West on Twitter. I'm known for selfies and pictures of wine and occasionally technology content. So I work at Algolia. Has anybody heard of Algolia before? Yes? 4 or 5? Handful of people? Algolia is a hosted search API, so it allows you to add search to your website really easy. It is not Elasticsearch, and it's not built on top of Elasticsearch, but it's something different. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to come find me afterwards. I'll have a bunch of stickers and some bottle openers and all that stuff. So what exactly is a DevReloper? Some of you might be asking. The term's really kind of tossed around, and I saw it in a few Slack channels, and I thought it was really great, so I brought it into this presentation. And really, it's a developer that acts as an individual contributor on a developer relations team. Some of those, we see a lot of different titles tossed around for that. So it could be developer evangelist, developer advocate, community engineer, engineer, advocate, developer marketer, technical community manager, insert all the things above. And really all these titles, no matter what, really boil down to very similar things. So if we look at history, a lot of people think developer relations is this new trend. But actually, it's not. It's been around since about 1982 from Microsoft and Apple. However, when Twilio first introduced in 2010, we can see a spike here. That's when really it started becoming more of a mainstream thing amongst product teams. And this is because of the way they built their team and executed it. It's a little bit different way of showing, here's our product. We want to build with the community, and we want to communicate with them, and here's a beer. So. Since then, we've seen a lot more departments bring that into their departments. They've been adding that department into their company, but they might not necessarily know what to do or how to get started. So with that, really building your team strategy is important here. And building that upfront is really essential to your success. And it's a matter of your strategy, your players that will help determine how you move forward. For example, we wouldn't go straight into a game, football, soccer, whichever you want to fancy, without getting directions from your coach or from your team lead. So it shouldn't be the same thing for developer relations. We need some kind of strategy to move forward for that. Speaking of games, has anybody played the game Risk? Raise your hands. A few people? I recognize it's not that one. So I'll explain it a little bit. And so in Game of Risk, we have, you can see like these little pieces. You've got this big board, and you have all these different continents, and you have players that you can take to move forward on building up like a war strategy. So in the Game of Risk, someone's ability to build up armies depends aggressively on attacking to acquire territory. However, that really comes down to more of a roll of the dice. And so players that build up armies, they instead concentrate on holding the line against the enemy attack, typically end up in a weaker position. So that's the proactive or reactive approach. So what does this really have to do with developer relations? Risk, it's a game. And essentially, we're kind of playing a game of DevRel here. So proactive and reactive strategies. We can look at these both in different ways. So proactive is doing the building up an army ahead of time. And versus reactive is waiting for the battle to come to you. So being strategic in your team and knowing the what, the why, and the when, and ultimately the how, will determine how your team will be successful. I want to make sure that we're clear with this if you aren't proactive with your strategies within your team, it'll ultimately fail. Because you're going to get an insane amount of requests coming in, and you can't just go out into the field without a plan. So being proactive is essential to your success. And reactive, by definition, really is just reacting to or acting in response to a situation rather than controlling it. I did a poll to a lot of people and said, what does DevRel look like to you? Give me a list of your day-to-day responsibilities. And I just asked a number of community members, and they gave me a big list of saying, like, this is what I worked on this week or today. And that varied amongst a lot of different things in different departments. And coming from marketing, I wanted to put it in a little cloud, so we had a nice demonstration here. And this looks really cool, right? Look at all these different things we're involved in. Community, content, creating things, blogging. And ultimately, if you're trying to do all of this, you can't do it all. You're one person, you're one team, and you'll be having your strategies really too dispersed. So in reality, this is what our inbox looks like from the stretched across multiple different departments. So we're touching departments from sales, engineering, product, doing community and culture. HR might want to talk to you about the best hiring practices. How are they known within the industry? Marketing wants to know how are we going to get our marketing leads up. Engineering wants to know, is the API good? What's the status? Do people like my code? Is it broken? Product wants to know if this is something that they want. And so when you look at all of these things, you can easily have a full-time job doing all of this, and plus some. However, what is this ultimately going to be doing for driving your strategy forward? That's not supposed to be blank. OK. So you saw earlier Alex mention Phil's DevRelometer, which I think is shown at least once or twice in every DevRelCon the past 3 years. But it's a really good demonstration. So Phil wrote a nice post talking about how you could decide what you were going to be doing for your team. Is it evangelism, advocacy, and what kind of things are falling into that? So if we look at all of these boxes and we check the initiatives, we're like, OK, I want to do every single thing. That sounds great. It's like shopping. And I'm known for that on Amazon. I just click all the things, and all of a sudden my cart's full of thousands and thousands of dollars. From that one, it's really too much. We can't do everything with that one. So you have to decide what's the best one for your strategy and your team. So I mentioned earlier kind of the game of DevRel. And in developer relations, one's ability to present a concept or present a product often depends on maintaining contact with the community. And that's through making like a series of events, or maybe a series of code, or blog posts. And all these different ways is how we can get in touch and engage with our community. And so this looks great, and it sounds good in theory, but what does it look like in practice? There's a specific skill set that you need for building your developer relations team. And this could be technical skills, writing skills, and people skills. I write a lot of JavaScript, if you couldn't tell. That was the very first thing I looked at. And finding these people on your team early on is how you can help create synergy and success. So having a nice balance of everything. So let's look through each one of these. Technical aptitude. Clearly, if you have developer in your title, you should probably know how to code. And you don't have to be the world's best coder. You don't have to be the best engineer. And you don't have to be doing it for very long. But you do have to have the ability to write code and execute a demo with some sort of polish. And when I say polish, you could be really good at your front-end skills. So maybe you're working on all the JavaScript or the CSS for that demo. Or maybe you are just a really skilled back-end engineer, and you're going to be showing how these functions are working best within that application. But either way, you need to have that code ability to work in this team. So typically, you want to find like an engineer, maybe a junior engineer, mid-level, coming from your team to come onto this team. The other thing is writing skills. You need to have the ability to write fluidly and technically. Writing content that's easily digestible and important is really important to reach your users. So whether that is walking yourself through, for that code that you just wrote, and saying, like, here's what this function means, or diving into why you chose a certain variable name or nothing. These are all really important to do to bring your team together. Or it's even just doing an event recap. Being able to say, I can communicate effectively to my audience is important. The other thing is people skills. And this can come in a variety of ways. So there's a ton of developer advocates that I know out there that are, they're not extroverts. They're actually introverts. And it takes a lot of energy to come out here. However, they have that skill to be able to communicate and engage and connect with people. And that's the important bit. So you don't have to be an extrovert to be a really good engineer, a really good developer relations person, but you do have to have that ability to connect with somebody. I personally am an extrovert. See me on stage and at karaoke later today. So this leaves us with the question, where do we even start to begin these teams? We have a lot of things with a lot of requirements, and we have a lot of good ideas. We see the potential for it, but where do I start? So proactive, by definition, we're creating or controlling a situation, causing something to happen rather than responding to it after it's happened. So we're coming here with a strategy. So you can either with risk, with any of your sports analogies. And with that, where do we start with those those three aptitude skills we just talked about? I like to think of evangelism as a triangle, right? It's in words, in person, and in code. And you want to have all these connections with people in multiple types of ways. I mentioned earlier saying, we want to have you code once and then use that multiple times. I believe it's Tomomi's presentation. And you can use this in the same way. So code one demo application, and then write a blog post about it. Maybe do a vlog, if that's more your thing, and doing a video tutorial. You could give a conference talk about it. Or you can go to a meetup and explain in depth, what did you do with this code? How do you get it going? And that one piece of content is hitting all three trifectas. And that's really important to be able to make that impact with people. Because people all learn differently, as we learned earlier. So they may see that piece of code and they didn't quite get it. But maybe with the second touch point with the code and the content, that snaps. Or maybe it's the second piece and second time for the video or the event because they went and talked with you afterwards. So having all three connections is really important. Speaking of three, so they say good things come in three, so let's go into a little bit more about what we can do for that. So there's the 3 C's. Some of you may have heard of that. In 2014, Brandon West had coded that and defined saying 3 C's as core principles for an efforts in reaching developer relations. I think it's a really good article to go read and seeing how things are broken down. It's a very short one, I think it's about 4 minutes. So you can go check it out after the talk. And when you read this, think about how you're going to discuss this with your executive team and what you're going to do for your developer relations department. So with code, you can be doing things like tech support, maintaining SDKs. You could be doing kind of get started demos, advanced API examples, or mashups with other APIs. For example, Auth0 and Algolia are doing a mashup later today, and that's a perfect collaboration point that you could be doing with people that amplifies your effort of 2 people. And honestly, if you're trying to reach developers, again, you should be able to code, speak their language, and this can be done in a number of ways. Content. So now the writing skill comes into handy. You can't just code, because it's not enough to solve a developer's problem is just lines of code. You need to do it in an abstract manner. So that second point of contact, that really makes it easy for them to digest and understand it. So you need to proactively publish very clear, concrete implementations, and you need to do this in a relatively easy way to find it. So that could be on what you have on Discourse, maybe Stack Overflow, your own blog, really whatever the best way is for you to reach your developers in that kind of community. And then also documentation is a great way to do that. There's plenty of developer relations teams that start off with writing documentation against their API. And it's a good way to see what's going on, if there's any problems, and write it in a digestible manner for people to find and execute. I personally like doing demo projects and then walking through them and having a video afterwards, because to me, that's how I learn the best. So whatever you think, and like with your teams, find that skill and have them execute on it. And then community. One of the big reasons we're all here is we are being a part of a community. We want to find other people that are in similar relations and different departments, and we want to connect with them. So we can do that by attending events. We can do that by sponsoring events from the company perspective. We could do that by supporting open source projects, whether that's in a financial manner or having someone on your engineering team actually commit to the open source. And then the other one is engaging online communities. So go outside of where you're just pushing your own content, your proprietary content, and engage with people on other areas. So again, that goes to like not just your discourse, but go to Stack Overflow. I'm pushing Stack Overflow a lot. I don't mean to. But going into those other communities is really key and important to making sure that your department and your company is seen as genuine, because you're not just pushing your own content, you're trying to help other people. I think this is a really important thing to think about, because again, it's that repetition and those multiple touch points that really gets developers to understand your product. And if you can do that in an effective manner and trial things three ways, you can really get to make sure that your brand and your message to your communities is felt effectively. So we can find maybe 3 developers. One's really good at coding, blogging, and kind of conversation, and pull those all together. And honestly, we all react and engage with brands in different ways, so you need to make sure you hit those. Okay, I think I've talked about those 3 enough. So if we take a step back and look at like the 14,000-foot level, we want to get out of the weeds a minute and talk about strategy, because before we can even get to that code, content, and community, we have to make sure that our department is ready for it, and that our company knows that what we're doing and how to get there and why. Have you written the DevRel Bill of Rights? Anyone heard of that a little bit? So Neil Dash published this, I believe like last fall, and he's the CEO of Fog Creek Software. And what I really liked about that is these top 2 points. And the whole blog post is very good to read about what's happening in the developer relations side, and in the business area, how do you tie that to strategy? The big things I think are really important are a clear set of business goals. And this is dictating a strategy that's clearly defined for you and to communicate to your team and your company. Really, if you don't have that, you can't really move forward. And then on the next one is like a well-defined place in the organization. It's really important to recognize and understand what your objectives are and how they align with the company and where that aligns with the department that you're in. And this will look different in each company. So now we know that we have that, so how do we start defining those? We need to think about what's the best thing for our company. Is it going into different, actually that's the next slide, sorry. Are you in a product, marketing, engineering? Do you know yet? Are you going to be in your own individual department? This also could vary if you are a company of 5 to 100 rather than a couple hundred, 1,000. So if you're a small startup, you might just be reporting to your CEO or your CTO, and that's totally fine to start off with. But it's important to have more of a vision and see where you are within those departments. So if you are in product, for example, maybe the idea is that you focus on content and upcoming releases. So you can communicate that to your community and say, hey, we've got this new A/B testing, and this is something really cool, and here's an example of it. Or marketing, maybe that's more of just awareness from everybody. And so we want to have more awareness on Twitter, or maybe it's discourse, or some more online content and engagement. Or if it's in engineering, maybe that's maintaining those SDKs and those docs that your engineering team can't handle right now. Or it's not a priority, and then you can bring that up as a priority. Either way, these are important things to start asking yourself when you're building that team and figuring out what's the best strategy for you. And that can kind of go into evangelism, advocacy, or community. So we listed all those titles out earlier. And so you could be a developer evangelist, you could be a developer advocate, maybe you're a community manager. And that can all change depending on what you want to do. I mean, some people have fun little titles like, I am creator of all things. And then that's it. So if we go back to that DevRel meter, let's say we want to we go through and say we want to do coding and maybe more some talks, and I want to do speaking events. That's typically what we would say is like evangelism. And I would challenge you to do this exercise if you're looking to build a developer relations team, go here and start writing down, clicking on these different things and seeing what is important to me. What are these things that I can do to execute, and back it out to what that goes to your bottom line strategy. So advocacy, let's say we want to be a little more code and content heavy. So really the developer relations team within your company looks more like writing code and a blog post and on repeat. So you don't have a lot of examples out there, and maybe that's something you need to do for showing that new API. Or you've got lots of changes coming out and you need to keep updating those sort of things. This is a really good strategy for more of a product-focused company like that. So then after this exercise, say this can help start answering your bottom line questions, like which department you should be in, and how do you achieve that? So we know the tagline for developer relations is creating and building a community. But where does that lie in the rest of the company? You need to really determine what your bottom line objective is. Is it increasing qualified leads? Is it pure brand exposure? Stealing market share? Or maybe it's more developers using your API exclusively, and that's all you need to focus on. But answering these that'll help you point you in the direction of analyzing traffic with marketing, reviewing these kind of upcoming releases with product, or finding those events to attend. This one, to me, I think is really key here, and this goes back to that very first one, is finding your executive sponsor. So now you know, okay, here's what department is, here's some objectives, who's going to be my cheerleader, so to speak. Because you're not going to be at every C-level meeting, and you're not going to be able to see what are they talking about and how does my department hold up against that. So you need an executive sponsor to really truly understand your KPIs and how they relate to the business. So they need to be in your corner and your champion. And really that will ultimately make or break your team. So talking with executives and find that one, they want to focus on outcomes. So defining those 1 to 2 key performance indicators, measure success against your great team is where you can start. This, for example, let's say we increase dev traffic by 20%. Or maybe we are doing developer accounts by 10% this quarter. Or we're getting a number of eyes on the product and on stage for attending events. By the way, you have a list of things to do, but the executives want to know one thing. Okay, what are your 2 things you're going to do? Great, I'm going to go do that. I've got your back for saying that we are going to increase web traffic by 20%. So you should be able to answer these questions after your exercise with your executive sponsor. Because these are the things ultimately they want to know is cost. How much is it going to cost us? Not just budget, but for people. And how is that what's the opportunity cost for us as a company if we don't have developer relations? And what's the opportunity cost if we do? How can we get more eyes to our company? And with that, what are the outcomes? So that comes to our KPIs and how we're going to be measured against our OKRs here. So they want to know, like, how are we measuring this? And what are the measurements at the end of the quarter? And finally, basically, what do you need from me? Do you just need my support? Do you need my mentorship? Or do you need me to help figure out what is the best thing for this department? And you can have varying levels of executive sponsorship, but the important thing is that you have that. And you have them on your same page. So, fun fact about me, I used to race cars a lot. And it was one of my favorite things to do. So I really try and bring in more car analogies and things like that. I don't do it anymore because it's a very expensive hobby, and I realize I value my life, and I don't want to crash. However, when I was working on this deck, I realized I had kind of an acronym coming in there. And so I wanted to talk about, now we have the tools for what we need to do, let's talk about how we want to execute those. And you just have to remember to drive. So this one, really to kind of summarize, we want to define your objectives early and often with your deliverables. And what that means, you want to have a clear idea of what you're working on, how your team will be measured, and what performance metrics will highlight your team's work. The next thing we want to do is review that with your company and your executive, and really communicate to the company why. Why is the developer relations team here? What are they doing? And what's the purpose for that? And this will help carve out space for what you and your team are doing, and as well like why it's different and what's needed. And iteration and retrospectives. We do this on engineering teams. It's really important to do this also for us as DevRel people. We can't just continue doing the same thing assuming it works or it doesn't work. So let's review it at the end of the quarter, month, or whatever you find is the best timing for your team, and say, did this work? Did it not? What can we do better? And adaptation for this as well, because the marketing team, the marketing changes, right? So we have to make sure we can adapt to that, hence iteration. And that could change occasionally. Maybe your product needs to change the direction for how you're being promoted in the next 6 months. And again, that's OK, because we can adapt. And from that one, we want to validate your findings. So we'd say we've increased web traffic by 30%. Did that increase any conversions? Like, let's validate, was that the right thing to do? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe we had a bunch of web traffic, and they were like, wow, this is not what I wanted at all. And I felt really confronted by it. So there's a lot of people you can look at, like the drop-off page rate, and make sure that when they got to that landing page, was that what they were looking for? And finally, evolve. Really seeing success in these items will help you improve your strategy and your team. So from that one, repeat it. Define your objectives and deliverables. Review them with the company, iterate, validate, and go on. And another thing I wanted to end on, and I loved that right before my talk, Tomoko was talking about communication and how it's so important. And I really agree. I think that communication, not only with the inside team and outside your team, it's really important because not everybody knows what you're doing. And so once you have defined all these objectives and deliverables, not only outside of your executive sponsor, but make sure you're talking to other people outside your team. Go hang out with the marketing team, or engineering, or sales. Take them out for coffee and tell them about what you're doing and how that'll make a difference. And also just to the community in general. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And with that, I want to say thank you. My name is Jessica. Feel free to come find me after with any questions. I'd love to talk. I have enough energy that I've had enough caffeination that I will be doing karaoke tonight, and I'm very excited. And that's it. So thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu. Oh, one more thing. I forgot. We're hiring. This is my very last edit for looking for a developer advocate in the United States and EMEA, and hopefully Tokyo soon. I'm working on it. So thank you.